Closing out a 25-day voyage around the Moon, NASA's Artemis 1 spacecraft fell back to Earth Sunday, making a 25,000 mph re-entry Sunday that subjected the unpiloted capsule to a hellish 5,000-degree inferno before splashdown off Baja California. In an unexpected but richly symbolic coincidence, the end of the Artemis 1 mission comes 50 years to the day after the final Apollo moon landing in 1972. Testing the Orion capsule's 16.5-foot-wide Apollo-derived Avcoat heat shield was the top priority of the Artemis 1 mission, and it is our Priority 1 objective for a reason, said mission manager Mike Safarine. There is no arc jet or aerothermal facility here on Earth capable of replicating hypersonic re-entry with a heat shield of this size, he said. And it is a brand new heat shield design, and it is a safety-critical piece of equipment. It is designed to protect the spacecraft, and so the heat shield needs to work. We've collected an immense amount of data characterizing system performance from the power system, the propulsion, GNC, and so far, the flight control team has downlinked to over 140 gigabytes of engineering and imagery data, said Jim Jeffer, the Orion Vehicle Integration Manager. The team is already analyzing that data, to help not only understand the performance on Artemis 1, but play forward for all subsequent missions, he said. If all goes well, NASA plans to follow the Artemis 1 mission by sending 4 astronauts around the Moon in the program's second flight, Artemis 2, in 2024. The first moon landing would follow in the 2025-26 timeframe, when NASA says the first woman and the next man will set foot on the lunar surface. The unpiloted Artemis 1 capsule flew through half of an orbit around the Moon that carried it farther from Earth, 268,563 miles, than any previous human-rated spacecraft. 2 critical firings of its main engine set up a low-altitude lunar flyby last Monday that, in turn, put the craft on course for splashdown Sunday. NASA originally planned to bring the ship down west of San Diego, but a predicted cold front bringing higher winds and rougher seas prompted mission managers to move the landing site south by about 350 miles. Splashdown came south of Guadalupe Island, some 200 miles west of Baja California. NASA and Navy recovery crews aboard the USS Portland, an amphibious dock vessel, were standing by within sight of splashdown, ready to secure the craft and tow it into the Navy ship's flooded, well deck. Once the deck's gates are closed, the water will be pumped out, leaving Orion on a custom stand, protecting its heat shield, for the trip back to Naval Base San Diego. But first, the recovery team will stand by for up to 2 hours while engineers collect data on how the heat of re-entry soaked into the spacecraft and what effects, if any, that might have on the crew cabin temperature. We are on track to have a fully successful mission with some bonus objectives that we've achieved along the way, Serafin said. And on entry day, we will realize our Priority 1 objective, which is to demonstrate the vehicle at lunar re-entry conditions.
Historic moon mission ends with splashdown of Orion capsule. A 25-and-a-half-day uncrewed test flight around the Moon meant to pave the way for future astronaut missions. The spacecraft finished the final stretch of its journey, closing in on the thick inner layer of Earth's atmosphere after traversing 239,000 miles between the Moon and Earth. It splashed down at 12:40 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday in the Pacific Ocean off Mexico's Baja California. This final step was among the most important and dangerous legs of the mission. But after splashing down, Rob Navias, the NASA commentator who led Sunday's broadcast, called the re-entry process textbook. "I'm overwhelmed," NASA Administrator Bill Nilsson said Sunday. "This is an extraordinary day." The capsule is now bobbing in the Pacific Ocean, where it will remain until nearly 3 p.m. Eastern Time as NASA collects additional data and runs through some tests. That process, much like the rest of the mission, aims to ensure the Orion spacecraft is ready to fly astronauts. We're testing all of the heat that has come and been generated on the capsule. We want to make sure that we characterize how that's going to affect the interior of the capsule, NASA Flight Director Judd Freeling told reporters last week. A fleet of recovery vehicles, including boats, a helicopter and a U.S. naval ship called the USS Portland, are waiting nearby. What happened? The spacecraft was traveling about 32 times the speed of sound as it hit the air, so fast that compression waves caused the outside of the vehicle to heat to about 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The next big test is the heat shield. Nelson had told CNN in a phone interview Thursday, referring to the barrier designed to protect the Orion capsule from the excruciating physics of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. The extreme heat also caused air molecules to ionize, creating a buildup of plasma that caused a 5.5-minute communications blackout, according to Artemis I flight director Judd Freeling. As the capsule reached around 200,000 feet above the Earth's surface, it performed a roll maneuver that briefly sent the capsule back upward, sort of like skipping a rock across the surface of a lake. There are a couple of reasons for using the skip maneuver. Skip entry gives us a consistent landing site that supports astronaut safety because it allows teams on the ground to better and faster coordinate recovery efforts, said Joe Bomba, Lockheed Martin's Orion Aerosciences aerothermal lead, in a statement. Lockheed is NASA's primary contractor for the Orion spacecraft. By dividing the heat and force of re-entry into two events, skip entry also offers benefits like lessening the G-forces astronauts are subject to, according to Lockheed, referring to the crushing forces humans experience during spaceflight. Another communications blackout lasting about 3 minutes followed the skip maneuver. As it embarked on its final descent, the capsule slowed down drastically, shedding thousands of miles per hour in speed until its parachutes deployed. By the time it splashed down, Orion was traveling about 20 miles per hour. While there were no astronauts on this test mission, just a few mannequins equipped to gather data and a Snoopy doll, Nelson, the NASA chief, has stressed the importance of demonstrating that the capsule can make a safe return. The space agency's plans are to parlay the Artemis moon missions into a program that will send astronauts to Mars, a journey that will have a much faster and more daring re-entry process. Orion traveled roughly 1.3 million miles during this mission on a path that swung out to a distant lunar orbit, carrying the capsule farther than any spacecraft designed to carry humans has ever traveled. A secondary goal of this mission was for Orion's service module, a cylindrical attachment at the bottom of the spacecraft, to deploy 10 small satellites. But at least 4 of those satellites failed after being jettisoned into orbit, including a miniature lunar lander developed in Japan and one of NASA's own payload that was intended to be one of the first tiny satellites to explore interplanetary space. On its trip, the spacecraft captured stunning pictures of Earth and, during 2 close flybys, images of the lunar surface and a mesmerizing Earthrise. Nelson said if he had to give the Artemis I mission a letter grade so far, it would be an A, not an A+, simply because we expect things to go wrong. And the good news is that when they do go wrong, NASA knows how to fix them, Nelson said. But, if I'm a school teacher, I would give it an A+. With the success of the Artemis I mission, NASA will now dive into the data collected on this flight and look to choose a crew for the Artemis II mission, which could take off in 2024. Artemis II will aim to send astronauts on a similar trajectory as Artemis I, flying around the moon but not landing on its surface. The Artemis III mission, currently slated for a 2025 launch, is expected to put boots back on the moon, and NASA officials have said it will include the first woman and first person of color to achieve such a milestone.